Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special episode of Tales from the Fandom. I am joined by a very special guest making her fourth, I believe, appearance on this podcast. I could be wrong, and I'll get corrected if I am. But we are here to talk about the 15th anniversary of Battlestar Galactica. I can't believe that the miniseries of the reboot launched way back in 15 years ago, I would say, December something, whenever this is coming out. I get my notes here.
It was a long time ago, that's for sure.
December 8th, 15 years ago, Battlestar Galactica, the miniseries reboot, burst its way onto the SyFy Network, and no one kind of anticipated what was going to happen, and we got a number of seasons and a couple spin-offs actually, and movies and web series back when they were doing web series stuff on websites. But I am joined by Barbie Wi to talk all about Battlestar Galactica. Welcome back.
Hi, everyone. I'm back. I'm actually glad you're keeping count because I am not. I think this is my fourth appearance. That sounds right.
I think it is too. We've done the Buffy 20th anniversary. We did your original episode way back in 2016.
Way back. Yeah.
And then you came on for the second anniversary episode.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That is 4.
So this is number 4.
Yep.
And I remember when we were talking doing that episode for the second anniversary, I had mentioned, I'm going to do this Battlestar Galactica 15th anniversary. And I believe your response was, oh my goodness, that's one of my favorite things of all time.
It might even be my favorite thing of all time. Honestly, if I were pressed, I think I might have to say Battlestar.
Oh, wow. That's high praise there, because you've got a lot of other, we've talked about a number of different fandoms, and Battlestar being number 1, that's pretty high praise coming from you.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It was, let's see, I guess the later seasons were airing when I was pretty young, still in grade school. And so I remember passing, through the living room or whatever, and it would be on. My parents would watch it, and I didn't have the attention span or whatever to sit in on it then, but I do remember it being there. And when I went back later as an adult to do the whole series, I think they had it on Netflix, and I was like, well, there's a lot of episodes here. This is something good for me to watch while I work. And I went through it, and it honest to God just blew my mind. I was like, this one. And it was very early in nerddom for me that happened. So I've kind of been with it ever since.
Oh my goodness. You're telling me that you're when it was originally on, you were walking through, walking around in grade school, and I'm like, well, let me see. I was working and out of college, and almost, I think one of the first kids was on the way, and oh,
yeah,
wow.
I was really young. I had to be 9th grade, something like that.
Okay, so not grade school young.
Yeah, but
okay.
Down there, not in college yet.
Oh,
I'm
my
older
goodness.
than I look. Let's not talk about that.
No way.
It's my birthday this month, actually.
Yay!
Yay! I get cake.
Cake. Get your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, actually, one of my favorite birthday gifts in the entire world. Let's see, a number of years ago, my husband bought me replica Battlestar dog tags that I just adore. It's got my name, obviously, and then my ensign number is a combination of our wedding dates and our birthdays, and they are incredible. I'll tell you the company later. I don't want to put it on air because I'm not sure they still make them.
Okay.
But the quality is just, they're perfect. They're screen accurate down to the thickness. I just love them so much.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you were originally exposed to Battlestar when it was airing, but not really
kind of
watching
sorta.
it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing when my parents watch shows, and I'd walk through and be like, oh, you're watching something. Let me just keep moving on because I got other things to do.
Right.
but then you found it on Netflix and you're like, I'm going to give it a chance.
That's how it happened.
Okay, so you started Battlestar. What was the draw for you once you got into it? Like, what caught your attention to make you watch the show?
I love Katie Sackhoff, so it was not hard to draw me in, especially once I realized that it was the way they remade it. They put a woman in what had been a man's role, because I didn't see the original first, and so it took me some time to realize that. And once I got that, in that context, what they'd done, which I think was very much before its time. Now we have all sorts of replacements and women playing traditionally male roles. But that was really on the bleeding edge, I think.
Oh, definitely. That was probably one of, if not maybe like the first show where they changed, like, especially for a reboot, where they changed the characters from male to female, or even added extra roles and really did the change, because I think even Boomer was also male and they changed that character to female.
Right.
But I could be wrong on that. I'm just speaking off memory on that one.
Sounds right. I've only kind of glanced at the original. I never went through, and because, I mean, how do you beat the reboot? My gosh.
Exactly. Like that reboot, especially, you know, when they made the miniseries, which it always astounds me that it started off as a miniseries and you didn't even know if they were going to have a show at that point.
Right.
And it's like, just the miniseries itself was just like amazing in quality. It still stands up to today, 15 years later.
Yes, absolutely it does. We were talking earlier about the graphics. Every time I go back through and do a rewatch, it just, like, it blows my mind. Some of them, I mean, you know, when they're walking around outside in space, a little bit hokey, sure. But they, like, the explosions and stuff like that, it's very well done, especially when you see some things that had been made even earlier, or later, as the case may be, and their graphics are not so great. I think they just did a really great job with it.
I think one of the things that I really liked about it is the way that they did the shots externally for like the ships and the ship designs, and how the ships were lit on the outside, the style choices, and even where they were in space, and just like the relations like to each other as far as like the ship distances, and if they had some like dramatic backdrop of a planet or a nebula station, whatever it may be. It's just those scenes just establish the almost, it's not like a gritty like feel to it, because some of the ships are really like sleek, but it's got that really unique style of the camera work that they're doing, where it's like zoomed out and then you get a different zoom and the camera's moving all over. It's really good.
Yes, and it's very realistic. Like you say, the ships are not sleek. All of their design choices really lent to the idea that carries their story, that these ships were not made for this, that they were just, you know, in the right place at the right time, and now they have to kind of work together. It was, I have a design degree, so I notice things like that. The team that came together for that was just the exact right team that they needed. I think they got very, very lucky.
Absolutely. And I did a rewatch before we started for this recording. I wanted to make sure I was caught up to date. And like, I remembered the overall story, but you go back and watch it and there are so many like little things that you start picking up on that you like. It absolutely is one of those shows where every rewatch you're going to pick up on even more of those like small details. Or
like things that you forget, kind of like, I hate to say this, but I'd forgotten that Billy dies. It was so sad.
I had forgotten that Lee Adama and Duwala had a relationship.
Oh, good. Forget that. So stupid.
There was definitely some choices, and I think Chief Tyrrell says it best as far as like personal relationships and it attributes to like the characters, is that you're really just stuck with who you have and on these ships, and you're taking the best of what you can get.
which rings true with everybody else. But I really feel like Duala was a plot device. She was set there to create dissonance between Lee and Kara, and she never made sense. And she made a ton of sense with Billy. I loved them together, and I liked Duala as a character up until the last. But as for her relationship with Lee, I contrived the whole thing. I hated it.
Yeah, it was definitely not one of the greatest like relationship choices. I did like her with Billy.
They were so cute.
Yeah, and Kara's just her own thing, which we'll eventually get to talking to Kara specifically. But yeah, Kara Thrace could take up an entire episode.
Yes, she could. She is to date. God, like I'm not thinking of any female character that I love more. She's just, you either love her or you hate her, and I happen to fall on the side of loving her.
Well, so let's go ahead. Well, let's talk about Kara Thrace because we're on her.
Kara Thrace.
So we'll talk about her now. I have a love-hate relationship with her.
Do you?
As far as the character, because sometimes, and I get it. It's just sometimes she just didn't connect with me. It's like, man, I just don't like you. I don't like you as a character. But then she'll swing back, and it's like, wow, I really like you as a character now. I don't know if that's part of. I don't know if it's part of it being tied to how like she's invested in like the greater story, but sometimes things don't get explained, they get dropped off. I'm not sure how I feel even after the second rewatch with her and Anders as a couple.
No, veto.
I get it from a certain point of view, but it didn't work for me. And so I love Kara. I guess maybe I like Kara when she's good, like good Kara.
Right.
But when she's acting out or drunk or not just the way that she tended to be, I'd be like, man, I let's move on from you. Or sometimes there'd be the focus on Lee and Kara a little bit too much. And while I like them together, it just is like oil and water. Sometimes they just didn't mix for me.
Yeah. And I think she was written to be that way, a very divisive character, so that you weren't always on her side, because then the story would have been too easy, I think. But for me, I just connect with her really well. I have a bit of a temper myself, we'll say it that way. And so when she would say things, I was like, yes, honey, let it out. I mean, not necessarily the drunken rants, but when she was saying things that needed to be said, I mean, the things she said to Ty, I was like, yeah, that's warranted. I see nothing wrong here. And when she would go through, and obviously I love to see a woman succeeding in a male-dominated industry, which she did very well. She was very good at her job, which was to fly a Viper. She was a great pilot. As far as Anders, I loved them until they got married.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that of course, she rescued him. He's gonna have a complex after that. I mean, he was living amongst a hostile species, basically. Like, that's got to be some PTSD. And when you come back, the person who's rescued you, of course you have fond feelings towards them. Of course you put them on that pedestal. And it does, like Tyrell said, you have who you have, who's there, who's convenient almost. And if they hadn't forced it into a marriage, I think it could have been really great, because again, Kara sometimes just doesn't need to be with people because she's not in a space to be with people. And if she hadn't been tied down in marriage, I think that would have been just fine, because you could have her when you wanted her, and then she could do her own thing when she was doing her own thing.
Exactly. And there's definitely like that scene, I can't remember if it's from the movie or the actual TV series, where like Lee and Kara have that like one night together, and then the next morning he wakes up and finds out that she's married to
Yes,
Anders.
that's
And
from the series.
and it's like not only is that the catalyst for that, but then there's like the full-time like Duala Lee relationship goes from there, and it's I don't know, like it's just so much right in those like two people making just everything around them either bad
Terrible. Yeah.
or worse.
I mean, they might as well lit the ship on fire. It was a hot mess, I hate that. I mean, I understand, because I am also a person who does things out of spite. However, I do draw the line at spite marriages. And so for Kara to, wake up and go off and do that, awful. I mean, it's very much in character, but no, Kara, no.
Is it safe to say that Kara is your favorite character out of the Battlestar Galactica universe?
No, it is. I do love her very, very much. President Roslin is my favorite, which is a very divisive idea. A lot of people do not like President Roslin. But again, I really love the way that she was not swayed when she wanted to accomplish something. She didn't let herself be, pulled one way or the other. People couldn't influence her decisions when it really, really mattered. And I loved that about the character. And I thought she was played really, really well. I think that's Mary McDonald. Beautiful woman. I just thought she was fantastic.
It's always interesting to see her pop up in other things, other shows, and it's like, that's President Roslin.
Forever, yeah.
And it goes the same way for a number of these characters, where you see them somewhere else and it's just that they are their Battlestar Galactica character. What are you doing in this show?
Yep. Especially with Trisha Helfer. She does so much. I follow her on Instagram because she's in the Animal Rescue game, and I love to watch that. And what is she doing? She's doing something with Katie Sackhoff right now. I forget the name of it. Oh man, it's on the tip of my tongue. She just released the first promotional image from it. I will probably see it because it has both of them.
I know that I liked Roslyn as far as like her character goes. I like that she's coming from this position of in the line of succession. Now she's the president.
Right, 37th, I think she was. And
she's doing everything she can, and she eventually gets into that role of president. And then just, especially the election with Baltar.
Oh my God.
And that whole thing of, trying to stuff the ballots,
essentially. She's so lawful good. She turns around, she says, no, don't rig the election. And ultimately, it creates this huge downfall for humanity. And it's just like, no, Roslyn, no, don't be so good. That's the argument for Kara, because Kara would have won by any means possible. That's where lawful good gets you.
Their relationship, Kara and Roslyn, is something that's really just... It's something interesting to watch, especially when you do, when you rewatch it and just see how they act together. And Kara's just, I wouldn't call it blind loyalty, but she has that leap of faith with her to abandon Galactica to go back to Caprica to get that arrow. Yeah. But I think Kara also has kind of a hero complex. And so when you offer her something like that, this mission where you may die, which I don't think Kara is afraid of, or you may come back with just a blaze of glory. That's something that Kara is never going to be able to resist. I don't think there's ever a time when she was out there that she was like, I'm concerned about dying. That just wasn't part of her.
No,
it was just...
she, on some level, I think she honestly courts it, because after the Cylons, I mean, what are you living for? You're living for the hope that you find somewhere safe, the hope that the Cylons don't find it. And I think that really contributes to her sense of recklessness. It is definitely something to watch, because there's some times where I was watching her, it's like, oh my gosh, please don't do that. Yeah. What do you do? What?
or then even being able to do something like go into a Cylon Raider and learn how to fly it. And
Yeah.
then you think about it, it's like you're inside like a formerly like living creature that has a metal skeleton on it, essentially.
Yep. It's
So
basically a space bug.
so weird.
Yeah. Gross.
Now, you love Rosalind. You have a very high respect for Kara Thrace. Were there any characters that you were like, I really hate them. I don't like them at all. And I know we talked about Duala a little bit as far as her
Yes.
being a plot device.
And
So
that's what I didn't like. Like everything post Billy's death was just like they were just using her. And I thought she was a very interesting character to have come from the background that she came from. I think she was she Taron?
I think she's a Sagittarian.
Sagittarian. Okay, that's what it was. And then to have moved up to an officer, which was very unlikely for Sagittarians. And they explain that within the series. Her background was so rich, like as a character, and then to just use her as a plot device, I think completely disrespected what she was. And that's what I dislike. I didn't dislike the character, but I very much dislike how she was used. There were definitely times, especially like during the trial, I was like, Gaia, shut up. I just can't take it anymore. Don't talk. And his whole like harem situation in the later seasons, that really grated on me. I can only take so much Gaius Baltar.
He's good in small doses.
Yeah, small doses, man. Small.
Yeah, as far as like Duala goes, I think one of my favorite things with her as a character was her relationship with Admiral Adama or Commander Adama. Like their relationship and how like he really leaned on her at times, as you know.
And she was good for it. She was a great officer, I think. Yeah,
and we're going to talk about deaths in a moment, but I think hers was one of those where you're watching it and everything's going along, and like her and Lee kind of like hung out again, and maybe there's a hope for them in the future, and then just she takes the gun and that's it, and it's like, oh my goodness, what is going on here? Like things are kind of looking up.
Yeah, again, plot device. I think she was used kind of for that shock value, and it was like, I get it. I mean, it is plausible to be very, very depressed, floating out in space, especially as hard as their lives have been up to that point, because it was the last season where we lose Duala. She deserved better.
What were some of the deaths that got you in the series?
Billy!
Billy?
Poor Billy. Let's see, who else? I feel like Callie really deserved it. I mean, I'm not even going to be mad about that. I'd have done the same damn thing.
Man, I loved Callie as a character, but then over time, it was like, I'm not really liking you as much as I used to.
Right.
And even like her getting together with Tyrell kind of was like I could see that at the beginning point.
Right.
But then
after he'd beaten her,
yeah, that was a bit much. I was like,
yes,
okay, we're going off of a deep end here for me believing it. But even then, like she did get on to like, is like, I understand, like Tyrell's like, you got to go to work too, you know. I can't be the only one going to work and giving you time off. And yeah, like you guys were. I don't know. It's just I don't know.
It was a hot mess. We'll leave it at that.
It was.
I liked her when she was, young and spunky. I thought she added ambiance to the hangar deck. And I would have been fine with her staying in that role, certainly. But as soon as they got married, and after Nikki was born, she became very prejudiced and very political, where she hadn't been before. And I get that people grow. That's not the unbelievable part. The unbelievable part was how extreme she got. And it turned her into almost a completely different character. And that was the problem. We basically lost the Callie that we had come to know. And in her place was somebody who deserved to get flushed out in an airlock.
Oh man. Yeah, that decision continues to like go forward from that point through the end of the series too. Like that one decision comes back to haunt all of them.
Yeah. Which I guess we can talk about Tori's death. Tori's death made no sense to me. I think that was the moment that made the least sense in the entire series. Up to that point, the final five have been so important, so important. Final five can't do anything without the final five. They each have a bit of the knowledge that they need to recreate resurrection, and so you need the final five to put that back together. And then Galen up and strangles Tori, and nobody says boo about it.
Yeah, and no one makes a move to like stop him.
No,
I mean obviously,
and it takes
like
a hot minute to strangle somebody, I assume. I don't have firsthand knowledge, but it doesn't seem fast.
Yeah, it's not, they're not imbued with like any extra strength or anything
Right.
that, anything that we would see from maybe a different Cylon or something, where it's like just automatically like, oh wow, you have like all of a sudden you can strangle someone and kill them rather quickly, and no one does anything about it.
Yeah, nothing. And even after the fact, nobody says anything. They're walking on the new Earth or whatever, new Caprica. I forget what they eventually name it. And they're walking along, and what does Ellen say? Go live your life, or whatever, to Galen. And it's like, and she's like giving him her blessing, and you've earned it. You've had such a hard time. It's like, ostensibly Tori was her daughter. I mean, that's the closest parallel we have, because she created them. I don't get it. I feel like that was a huge missing part in Ellen's psyche.
Well, let's talk about the Cylons and the Final Five as a whole, because at times, like when I watch the show and when I did my rewatch, I was constantly on Wikipedia or Googling just to like get some of that extra information, because some of the stuff doesn't feel like it's really put out there in the series to be like, oh well, this is what happened. Or you need to watch some of those special movies that they did, like The Plan or some of the other things where it's like it's telling that extra portion that's not in the show, and without it you don't really get it.
Right. And I think Caprica does that too. I know we'll talk more about that later, but I think it really informs the wider worldview.
Exactly. Now we have the main Cylons, like the infiltrator Cylons, the 7 of them.
Who was your favorite of those?
Oh gosh, I loved the 8s, the Sharons.
Yes,
they
who
were
I would
always
have to go with too.
They were always my favorite. I love the 8s. I mean, I did have.
Oh no, I lied. 6s.
Yeah, I love the 8s. I loved Boomer. But then
I love that Boomer had that storyline. I like the 8s. They had a better role, I feel like.
I like that Boomer. I liked Boomer originally, but then I don't like how she kind of sided with Cavill.
No.
Later on.
Cavill's my least favorite.
Oh gosh, I love Dean Stockwell, but I don't like Cavill.
Yeah, thumbs down. I always forget that Lucy Lawless is one of them. Every time I do a rewatch, I'm like, oh yeah, Lucy Lawless.
Right, and it doesn't look like Lucy Lawless at all.
No, not at all.
She's like a chameleon.
She shows up in Parks and Rec, and I do the same thing. Oh look, Lucy Lawless.
So you loved the 6s the best?
I do. I love the 6s. I like, and to some degree the 8s as well. They have a very human storyline as far as, redemption and changing their mind on things go, with the exception of Boomer, who moves in the wrong direction. I think they are the only dynamic Cylons, whereas everybody else is so static. They want, the status quo. They want the way things have always been. I think the 8s and the 6s are the ones that give us the real story.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's interesting because, okay, so we got the 6s and the 8s, and then the Deanna model, she is her number the 4?
I think that's right, yeah.
Okay.
I always just call her Lucy Lawless. The Lucy Lawless Cylon.
The Lucy Lawless Cylon.
Yeah.
It's like the even numbers are like fairly decent. At least those. I can't remember who the 2s are off the top of my head.
I always forget.
But yeah, most of the other like the male Cylon models, except for the weird one, and I can never remember the one that's obsessed with Kara.
Yeah, the Doctor.
No, not the Doctor. The really crazy one.
Oh, okay, I know. Oh, he's got such a big storyline. He kidnaps her and everything, and we hear his name over and over again. What is his name? That's gonna kill me.
I don't know. I'm trying to look it up right now.
Yeah.
Leoben.
That's it. It's not like even a name. That's the problem. If it were an actual name, I think it would be easier to remember, but it's not.
It's not. Yeah,
it's two names squished together.
I like that out of all the Cylons, like he's the one that has like this almost like he's got this connection to something greater, which it's explored with her, like him and Kara at length often.
Yes.
Where it's like, and it's starting to tie them into this story where at times you're like, what is going on? What are they doing? Because it's just out there.
I think was really well done. The way that they tied, oh my gosh, moments way later in the series back to that interrogation with Leoben, where he, basically prophesized to her.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many things that stem from that collection. His words come back in so many different ways. I think that was A+. I think they did that really well.
And I'm looking over some of these people in the cast, and I'm remembering their deaths, and it's like, oh, I remember who was it? One of the Viper pilots that
Cat?
was like Cat, yes.
Yeah.
As like even characters as small as like the Viper pilots or Raptor pilots, where you're getting these characters, and I know we're on Cylons now, but it's just they have these like stories like that you get a minute or two in the show, and it just continues to build. Like they don't just drop the character and forget about the character.
Right. And this last time that I rewatched, I realized Hot Dog is Admiral Adama's son in real life. And I don't know how I hadn't noticed that before. They look so much alike.
Oh my goodness, I did not know that.
Yeah, surprise.
Surprise.
I think his name is Eddie almost. Is that right? I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, I was like, well, look at that. Every time I rewatch, you catch something.
Absolutely. Bodhi almost.
Bodhi, not Eddie.
So back to the Cylons, we have this awesome story of them doing like infiltrating, which I think the best thing to say is if you've watched the Battlestar Galactica series without watching anything else, definitely need to watch The Plan, which is basically telling it from the Cylons' point of view about what's going on. And I actually have a really good like document that shows like the episodes and web series and movies and how you should watch them, so that way you can watch them in kind of like a chronological order, the way that it makes the most sense. And The Plan is definitely one where it's really helpful to see what's going on from the Cylons' point of view.
Huh. I would like to see that document. I bet that's interesting. Because there's also, we talked about Caprica briefly. There's also Blood and Chrome. There's a lot of extraneous material out there that I think does a pretty great job of keeping the world going.
Absolutely. It's definitely something where you can get lost in Wikipedia or
Oh,
interviews with
yes.
people and just keep clicking and discovering more about this world that was established, the 12 colonies and the 13th tribe, and the parallels that it has with like stuff here and our history, and of course the big ending of Battlestar Galactica and what they do there. It's like, oh yeah, I totally understand that.
And I think that's part of why it's my favorite. It's not just one story. It's not just one set of characters. There's always something else to discover. There's always more directions to move within that universe that they created. I think they did a really good job of making it incredibly vast.
Now I do have a question for you about the final five. Were there any surprises to you of who was in the final five? Were there others that were like, I think this person should have been a final five member rather than one of the ones that we got?
I mean, I thought Tori was an odd pick. She's the one who makes the least sense to me, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Just because she was integral, but she really wasn't. But I guess you had to have somebody from the president's camp to make the story work. I like it the way we got it. I don't think I would have changed anything. I knew Ellen was the final Cylon as soon as Saul killed her. That was a little heavy-handed. So that was kind of like, yeah, that's happening. And I'm glad she came back. I liked Ellen when she wasn't drinking. When she was just being her cunning self. I can get behind that. I like that she wanted her husband to succeed. That is a very real motivation. And as long as she wasn't, just off the deep end like she was when she was drinking, I thought she made a lot of sense.
Yeah, she's one of those characters where, man, I hate her for like 90% of the time,
Yep.
but then that other 10% where she's conniving and she's strategizing, and then you see her do these things and you're like, oh gosh, why? Like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And
But that's why she wanted Saul to succeed. Like, it was very rarely self-serving. And I love that part about Ellen.
one of the things that you had sent over to me for our discussion today was places where the show might have jumped the shark.
Yes.
Now,
can we talk about season 3?
we can talk about anything. I was just going to throw out the death of Tori because that was just ridiculous.
Yes. Yes, it was. I think that was the last shark jump. The very last shark has jumped the ship at that point. For me, the first shark jump was Lee's fat suit.
Oh my gosh, I like.
Do you?
Okay, let me just say, number one, I didn't know that was a fat suit. I thought maybe he just gained the weight, and then like they filmed it at some point, and then he takes a month or two off to do like heavy intensive workout.
Right.
I didn't know that was a fat suit, but I loved like Fat Lee. Fat Lee was like, because it's honestly, you're up there not doing anything. You're living in this like piece of, I don't know how many months it had been or whatever, where they're not having to do anything. He's not having to be a Viper pilot. And it's like, yeah, I totally see him getting fat.
Well, right, but what officer loses their discipline like that? No, there's nothing to fight, but you've been an officer this whole time, and that's kind of how your mind works. I feel like it wouldn't have gone that sideways that quick. I don't know. And nobody else did. It was just Lee. I just thought it was. They were like, "Oops, didn't think we were gonna get a third season."
that the way that he was, and then of course like people calling him out on it.
Yes.
And even Duala being like, I don't care about the weight, but you have gotten soft.
I loved that. She was never afraid to call him out on his stuff.
He's like a Pillsbury Doughboy in space.
Oh, he was. Yeah. He was Chief Pillsbury Doughboy.
What else? What else jumped the shark besides Doughboy Lee?
let's see. I feel like the trial, as integral as it was, went on for a really long time. And the let's see, the episode where they give the verdict, is that the season 3 finale or mid-season finale? I forget when it lies in there. But that's actually, I think, my favorite episode. Just because of the cinematics, it was just beautifully told. But it drug out, and then you turn around and you see there's this harem that has adopted Baltar, and I was like, no.
And they're on, number one, they're on Galactica in like some like random hold.
Yeah.
And I get that there's places of Galactica that, you know, maybe got forgotten about, but how do you, and they also had all the refugees, some of the refugees from some of the ships on there. But still, like, that's a lot of people.
Yes, it is. And I just, to go from being, you know, a convict, which I think was drug out again way too long. I think that could have been cleared up in 2 episodes, 3 tops. And then to go to basically being worshipped as a living god. It was just a little too much for me. Mostly because, again, Gaius Baltar is good in small doses. And that was not a small dose. It was all Gaius all the time.
Which Baltar do you like the best? Do you like Scientist Baltar, President Baltar, or Cult Leader Baltar?
I can get behind Scientist Baltar the easiest, for sure. Like when he's trying to, you know, the early days when he's trying to figure out a Cylon detector and kind of save his own ass, that sort of thing. That was endearing Baltar. That was useful Baltar. Everything else I have literally no use for. I don't think he... I mean, he just kind of became... All he was doing was, you know, covering his ass. That's it. I mean, he was protecting his own skin. That's sort of what Baltar devolved into. Which meant that he was so introspective and that his stories always kind of prioritized himself. And I really liked it when they interjected the Rogue Six into his story, and they kind of both realized that they were seeing whatever they were seeing. That was nice because at that point he was not the sole focus of the story. And it was kind of like getting Scientist Baltar back for just a minute.
Exactly. And it's definitely one of those characters where, like, he's got this evolution, but at the same time, you wonder where the character, like, if you told me at the beginning of the series that Gaius Baltar would become this, like, cult leader slash, like, even at the end where he's got the gun and he's doing stuff within the Cylon, or within, I don't know if it's the Battlestar or within like the Cylon base and just defending it. It's like I would never have expected that.
Yeah, he definitely went on a journey, and I love Farmer Baltar at the end, where they're walking. Excuse me. They're walking and they're talking about the land. He and the Six, you know, about how he'd run from his life. I think he was Tauron.
Yeah, he was.
And he'd come up in society, and that was kind of his pride. He was not Tauron anymore. He had changed his dialect. He had changed his stars, basically. He had money. He that's how he defined success for himself. He was not Tauron anymore. And then to get towards the end, and they're looking at the land, and he says, you know, this would be good right there. I know a lot about farming. And Six says, I know you do. And he breaks down, and it was just like, yes, finally, Baltar is lovable again. I loved that moment. I thought that was so sweet.
I know one of the things that I love, and I love this about all shows or movies or any kind of thing that I can get my hands on, is like those small characters, those background characters, where you see, like, you know, Cat and Hot Dog, and you grow to learn about them and love them. But there's one that really stands out, and I only know him originally from a different TV show called Leverage, but Romo Lampkin was amazing. He's the lawyer that eventually
Yes,
goes
the
on to
Irish
be.
lawyer that came out of nowhere.
Yes, I was reading an article about how he got onto Battlestar. They said, oh, we can. He actually asked to be a Cylon at one point, but it didn't work with the schedule that he had with whatever else was going on. And they said, oh well, we've got this thing. It's going to be like 1 or 2 episodes max. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. And then he just kept coming back, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, like Romo Lampkin is that character where it's so good. Like he eats the scenery.
Because they don't have Ireland, obviously. So one of the colonies had to get kind of translated into Ireland, which is typically, I would call it a poorer colony comparatively when you see the riches that Caprica has. And he must have come up. That's just me speculating. He's done well for himself. But I loved that he never covered it up like Baltar did. He was what he was, whichever colony he came from. And he was both that and an incredible lawyer. And I love that he leveraged that to his own personal gain. Like after the Baltar trial is done, Baltar asks him, what about his book deal to kind of head that up? And he says, no, he has other offers on the table because that trial had sort of made him a star.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
And then at the end, he becomes the president of the 12 colonies for however long that lasted.
Yeah. Yeah, he just kept popping up, and I love that.
Yeah, I love things like that, especially and it's got to be interesting to be I can't even call it like a recurring character, but to be on a show where they say, okay, you're going to be like a Viper pilot, and then to get that phone call and be like, okay, we need you again. Okay, we need you again and again, until they eventually like kill off your character or just have you added in as like something bigger. It's really neat to see like those people just continue to show up.
Yeah, he was pretty great. And he's one I always forget when I do like rewatches. Because he just kind of pops up, and I'm like, oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah, that guy right there.
Oh, I missed a character that I did not like.
Okay, tell me about it.
The Pegasus captain.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
I always even forget her name.
I'm trying to look it up right now.
She's Marianne from True Blood. That's how I always remember her. But oh my gosh, that whole like side diversion. I get that it moved the story forward, but I hated the Pegasus storyline.
Yeah, that one was rough, and I think that was another one of those where they had a movie like
yes.
I think it was Razor, where they focused on what happened after the shipyards blew up and what they had to do. And you see it on the show where like Saul is talking to the XO and like he gathers like what happened, but then to actually see it happen in that movie is like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe the differences that one person or one captain or one admiral or even like President Roslin, like one action and how it changed everything.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I get it. And it made the world richer. I just didn't like her.
Is Admiral Kane.
That's what her name was. Gosh. And I hated that she outranked Adama, but that she obviously didn't have the same heart. I hated the whole thing.
Oh gosh.
I once met a Pegasus cosplayer, and I was like, how can you be Team Pegasus?
Yeah, that was the worst of like her just showing up. It's like, oh gosh, no, you can't take control.
Yeah.
No, you can't do this. No.
Yeah, that's how I felt the whole time.
Why would you do that to Precious Adama? And then like their mutual like attempts to assassinate each other. That was really fun to watch.
Super great. Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? All right, so on top of like all these extra things that you had to watch, like they had some web series about like the Resistance,
Yes.
and then they had one where there's like a murder mystery, who was murdering the other characters, and it was it focused on the guy who had his leg cut off. I'm gonna have to pull him up.
Oh, Gata.
We're focused on Gata, like they were looking for something in a raptor and they went the wrong way, and so they had like that mystery going on, and it kind of showed why Gata tried to do his the coup with Zarek, which that was another storyline of, I get it, but at the same time I don't know how well it works.
I mean, I feel like it was a convenient way to off them both. Because they were both seditious, and to get them out of the way would have made the rest of the story easier, because you obviously couldn't trust them on, like when they boarded the Cylon ship at the end, you couldn't trust them with a mission like that. And so I feel like it was sort of tragic for Gata, but he'd made his choices and it did fit. I think Zarek deserved it.
Oh gosh, Zarek deserved it like a long time back.
Yeah. Yep.
Is only like Lee's I think it was Lee who was like, oh, you know, they need to be free and have representation, and
Yep.
But yeah, Zarek was always that thorn, and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't stand you.
Well, he
I
was
like
the
you for what you're
original
doing.
Starbuck, so I love that
Yep.
they kind of put him there, and I think he played it really, really well. There was never a moment when I didn't believe his character, certainly. I thought it was a really nice nod to the original series.
I love when they do that, where they have these actors that were in the original like come back and do something, and it's nice. It's nice to see that. It's like, okay, you are thinking about where you came from,
right,
and what you're doing now.
The torch is almost literally being passed.
Absolutely. Now, I was harassing you for, I was like emailing you, and I was like, I'm almost done. I'm almost done Battlestar Galactica. And then you said, hey, have you watched Caprica? If not, you really should, because
yes, I did.
It's good too. And I remember when Caprica was airing, and even afterwards, and people like were not really happy with it. It wasn't what they wanted, and so I never watched it. And
see, it flew under my radar when I don't remember it first coming out, because it was on SyFy, correct?
Yeah, it was on SyFy. They only aired, I think they aired 7 or 8 of the episodes and then canceled it, and then they showed the rest at a certain like later point, but they didn't
wow,
really
I didn't know that.
they didn't let it finish airing at like with a normal time slot. Like they canceled it, and then they showed everything else later, like the last few episodes.
I didn't find it until it was on Netflix, and I was like, oh my gosh, look, more of this world. And it was only, a season, so I knew what I was getting into, that it was likely going to be not enough. You can hear my dog in the background there. If that microphone is picking it up, that's what that is. And so I knew I was kind of getting into something where at the end, there've been a lot of shows, you get used to it. It ends and you're like, no. So I knew it was probably going to be that sort of situation. And it was for me. Oh my gosh.
It was, and it was something, and I told you it was before we started recording that there was an article somewhere, a review of Caprica, that basically said that Caprica was way before its way ahead of its time. Like it would be something now where people would be like, yeah, we need like 6 seasons of this.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think people coming from Battlestar Galactica, you're going to Caprica, which is a prequel, but it's something where it's not like space oriented. There's no big fights. There's nothing, like, it's all character driven.
It's very political, and you really see where like the seeds of the Cylon, like the psyche that created the Cylons, was born.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of those things where it's like, are you like, you're watching it and all of a sudden you're seeing these characters that you've heard about, especially with William Adama's father.
Yes.
and you're like, oh, that's neat. And then you're like, oh, like he's
Yeah.
not he's not the lawyer that you think he is
Not at
at the
all.
beginning. And it's just an incredible story that I
It
really
is.
wish they had more time
It's
to
a
play with.
lot of story. It is so smart, and so well seated. Like when things happen, you know exactly why they've happened because they were born out of something else. Um, I just thought it was so well done. I have no idea how it got canceled, other than people just weren't ready for it.
I think that's mostly what it was, is that people weren't ready for a show that was exploring like this political and religious and these like ethical questions. And like, you tune into Battlestar Galactica, you want to see some ships blow up and some
Yeah,
fighting and some drama and everything, and you're getting something entirely different.
very
You're getting
cerebral. Yeah, you have
you're
to
you're
think.
getting almost like a master class in like philosophy and religion.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't speak highly of it enough. It was so well done, and it supports a huge amount of the Battlestar worldview that we see in the series. It fulfilled so many roles. It's just incredible. It's totally worth it, even though it ends prematurely.
It does. And I think the worst part is that at the end of it, they show you like potentially what you could see in the next season, and
Yeah,
you're like,
I know.
no.
That was so sad. Oh, I wish they would
Now,
just like pick that back up right where it was. I think it would do just as well today. It would translate just as well as it did when they made it, which was 2000, 2000? Is that right? Ish?
um
2004?
I'm looking it up right now. Caprica was 2009.
Oh, goodness. Much sooner than I thought. I know Blood and Chrome was very recent. That was only like 5 years ago.
I'm looking Blood and Chrome up right now just to check.
That one was
Yeah,
also sci-fi.
2012. So
Okay, yeah. Yep. I feel like every now and then they come back to this world and they pick it up and they make something, in Caprica's case, absolutely gorgeous. Um, and then they set it back down. And so it's time, as far as timeline goes, it's time for them to pick something else up.
yeah, it seems like now's the perfect time. But with Caprica, did you have any like favorite characters or characters that surprised you and you're like, oh, people really need to like focus on this character?
I loved Lacey. Um, I think that the way her mind worked was very telling of the Cylon story. Um, I loved the virtual world. I forget what they called it. With the holobands. I thought
Oh,
that was a
like New Cap City, or
yes, New
just the
Captivity. That's what it
yeah.
was. Very, very gritty, very kind of what virtual reality could be. It's one of the ways it could go. I loved all of it. There's so much to be said about Caprica, honestly, and nobody I've met has ever seen it. I always have to direct people like, look, this exists.
Yeah, it's definitely something where I think even for the people that love Battlestar Galactica, getting them in, and I know even with the first episode of Caprica, it took me, like I watched it and I'm like, okay, but it's still I think it's a show that you have to pay attention,
You very
and
much do,
you've
yes.
got to get invested, and you've got to remember like this is set way before even like that Cylons were around, the Cylon War, like any of that. Like you're diving into something where the only connection you have is with Joseph Adama being a lawyer,
Yes.
and that's it. Like that's all you
But
got.
it blooms into something like revelatory. You understand so many layers as Caprica develops. I just so well done. I wish I were smart enough to run a show like that. That's just I bow down. It was so good.
that's a show where they've got to have like some big whiteboard
Oh,
and then
yeah,
have like different strings to people. And it's like,
absolutely.
let's remember everything that we've done and where we're going with this. And
Yeah, absolutely. It's
one
the only
one
way
of
to
my
keep it straight.
one of my favorite characters on that show really surprised me, and it was Sam Adama. I loved Sam because you have Joseph,
Mobster Sam.
lawyer guy, everything, but you got Sam and his knives, and
Yeah,
you learn all about where like Taurons and
yes.
like that whole culture, and
I
it's
loved
like,
the look into the culture of Tauron. I think that is so fascinating to me, just like the anthropology of the 12 colonies. I loved that look. I mean, it's barely the basis of anything in Caprica, except for the fact that where Adama came from is very, very much a leap from where we see him in Battlestar. I just love that.
and not only do you have Sam, who awesome character, loved him, but then you have William because he's
Yes.
in the show, and but it's like this sly twist, and at the end you're like, oh, oh my gosh, like that
It wasn't him
they
after all. Yeah.
they kind of played me on that one,
Yep. Yep, they did. I
and
won't
I think
spoil it because I really do. Like, if anybody out there has not seen it, that's really my goal for this podcast. Go watch Caprica.
what would your hook be to for people? Okay, so people that are listening to this probably have watched Battlestar Galactica.
I would
They
assume
might
so,
not
yeah.
they might not have seen Caprica. So what would be your pitch for them to watch Caprica?
I mean, if you're interested in psychology at all, in how we get from point A to point B, this is very much point A. It's a very early point A. It is so smart in that you do really have to think. If you're interested in that sort of thing, or even knowing more about the origins of Tauron or the Cylons or the religions on Caprica, I mean, just go watch it.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that because I want people to watch Caprica and come back and tell us how awesome it was.
Yeah, I really want comments. I want people to say, you are totally right.
Okay, I'm going to read you a few character names, and I just want you to tell me your thoughts on them. We're going back to original Battlestar now.
Okay.
So that way we don't spoil anything with Caprica. Just tell me your quick thoughts. You don't have to talk unless you want to, which totally go for whatever you want to. What are your thoughts on Saul?
Saul Ty is just an enigma. You never know what Saul is going to do. You're going to give him an order, but I mean, it may be done happily, it may be done begrudgingly, he may fight you on it. Sometimes I do not understand the deep connection and trust between him and Adama, because if it were me, I think that Saul would be a wild card. But so much of the success of the fleet depends on that trust, and it is very cool to see. I just don't understand it all the time.
I think you're right there alongside Ellen in the not understanding that relationship sometimes.
Yes. Well, I do think that Saul and Ellen deserve each other. They're both very flawed humans, and they both need what the other has. And I think that's where that comes from, that they're together out of need, more out of like destiny or anything. I think he has a very rich storyline. I'll say that. He's certainly not my favorite.
How about Hilo?
Oh, Hilo is precious. Let's see, Hilo. I was always sympathetic to Hilo, to him finding out that Sharon is a Cylon, to their baby. I love Hilo. I thought he was very level-headed in the way that he carries things out, which I appreciate. Whereas, we have Kara, who's very explosive, and no, don't do that, Kara. Hilo was always like, yeah, well, you make a good case. Go on. And I loved that he had both the officer side of him and the family side of him, whereas you see his loyalties shifting to protect that with everything he has. And I loved that about Hilo.
All right, how about one of my favorite minor, I guess I don't know if you'd call them minor or side characters, Doc Coddle.
Doc Coddle. I thought the moment between him and Rosalind is one of my favorites. There at the end, when he gives her, the final doses of meds before the big battle begins, he says, this will hold you for a few days or whatever. And she stops him and she says, "Thank you. You've given me time. You've given me, these years of my life." And he kind of moves on, but almost tears up. I thought that was so cute.
All right, last one. What are your thoughts on Hera?
Hera. I get that she was kind of the driving force from both sides. They both wanted to protect her. They both wanted to know more about her. But we never really get that. Sure, she's special because she's Cylon and human, but why does that make her special exactly? Like, they never expanded on that. And I think that could be like the seeds for a whole new series. What is so incredible about human Cylon hybrids? Where do we go once we're hybrids? I don't have any warm feelings towards Hera as a character. I was just like, she's there. She's a plot device at this point. But it would be cool to see like where she's gone.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where, and it's always something when you add a kid into like an even baby or kid into a show. It's like it's really hard to figure out where they're going to fit with the story and getting them into the story. And like I liked how they did it, especially like the opera house stuff.
Oh yeah.
But like her on the ship is just okay, and but then when she's taken to the Cylon base, okay, that's a little bit better, and it's making Boomer 8 like having emotions again, and I get it.
She did a lot for the story, but she's a baby. She's not that interesting.
She's no Kara Thrace.
That's just how I feel about children, okay? They're just not that interesting. I would love to see what happened to her after they settled and like how she's grown and how society has kind of treated her as they've grown with the idea of Cylon human hybrids. Again, anthropology, I just think that would be really, really interesting.
So if they come to you and they say, you know what, we're going to let you do a show, a Battlestar Galactica show. What would you do? Would you set it on Earth essentially with the multiple different colonies spread out and see what they're doing and how they're evolving?
Yeah, absolutely, I would. And kind of not right after they've settled, but pretty close to where, the idea of Cylon human hybrids is still a new thing, and there are always going to be people who are prejudiced. We have that in our society, and so we know what happens. So they would have to move through that, especially if the idea that human Cylon hybrids are superior in whatever ways. They're probably resistant to diseases, considering, that the Cylon blood cured Rosalind's cancer. They're probably, I don't know, stronger, smarter, some sort of, they know how things work, sort of like how Hera was able to give Kara the notes to the song. I would assume that they're more attuned into things, or maybe that's just Hera. I don't know. I would love to see how that is working out. That's what I would do, certainly.
Well, and let's talk about that before we start wrapping up and doing our ending parts of stuff. Is that, and I don't know if we even really like touched on it more, but Kara Thrace and the big picture of God and the Baltar Prime and Caprica Prime that are talking to like the main Baltar and the main Caprica, like what were your thoughts on that, especially like how it ended and their discussion and Kara just disappearing? Like, Kara's the harbinger of death, and she's back, but you don't know what she is. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I thought for a long time about Kara being the harbinger of death because I didn't understand it. She gets them to a place where they can settle and flourish and, do all this. I feel like maybe she was the harbinger of the death of the pure human race, because it does move toward that human Cylon hybrid. I go back and forth on what that was about. There was a moment, a few episodes before the end, where Kara hands Adama a figurehead for his ship. It's a little figurine. I think is it Athena? I think that's right. No, Aurora, the Herald of the Dawn. That's who it is. And that's how I like to think of Kara. She kind of heralded in, she was the catalyst in a lot of ways, for this new civilization. Maybe she was an angel. I think the Primes are quote unquote angels, or what their idea of angels is. They were beings that did the bidding of another. We'll put it that way. Because I think angels have a good connotation to them, and I do think that ultimately they were on the side of good, but they had some weird ways of doing it. And I like to think that Kara was or fulfilled a role like Aurora's, that she was just kind of there, and she came back because her work wasn't finished. I really don't know what that means in the bigger story of it all. Caprica is based very much in religion and the conflict between religions on Caprica. So I think that was kind of a nod to, this is real. You guys might not have it right, but there is a God. He is watching out. There are people who work for him. He is sending tools, people, however you want to call them, to better the greater good, to carry that forward. But it's very open-ended, and I really like that.
Yeah, it's definitely something where I think, when she disappears, you're like, okay, and it's got a few episodes where there's no Kara, and then Kara comes back. It's like, okay. Then they find Earth, and they find Kara's body.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what is going on here? Like, are we dealing with time travel? Are we dealing with like Cylon? Are we dealing with like a clone situation? Like, what is going on? And it's definitely something where even after all this time, you can still find people debating what actually was going on with that, and was it just like a plot device, or was it intentional throughout the entire series?
I definitely think that she was part of the meaning of why they did it, because the underlying conflict between Cylons and humans, other than the humans having made the Cylons and then abandoning them or whatever, is the difference between their gods. And I think at the heart of it, it is a religious conflict story. And to have it end that way sort of hints toward a benevolent being. I don't know if they were trying to say that. I don't know. I really love the sub-layers of the Battlestar world, and I think that's why I keep coming back to it.
So we've had Battlestar Galactica for 15 years. And I think at the start of it we talked about it, but has it stood the test of time all this time later?
Oh my gosh, yes. Absolutely. Like, down to the graphics. It blows my mind how good it still is.
And it's definitely something, as we've talked about throughout the series throughout this recording, of you watch it and you just pick up more and more things as time goes on. It's like, and I think that's one of the things that I really love about shows that have a smaller cast, but a cast where you've got, as I said, with like all the minor characters that keep showing back up, you can pay attention, you can focus on those characters and see what their progress is like, and it's really nice to be able to do that.
Yes. We forgot to talk about ships.
Oh my gosh, let's talk about ships.
You
I
guys
almost
thought
feel
the
like
episode was over, but it's not.
All right, let's talk about ships, because I know that was one of your major things of, like, when we're talking about Battlestar Galactica, you wanted to talk about ships.
I absolutely do. I have to go on record. I want the entire world to know and make no mistake. President Roslin and Commander Adama are my favorite ship of all time. I love them so much.
Okay, let me let me add in there because it's hilarious. I was waiting for you to say something about like actual ships. Like, which ship was your favorite? I was about to say like
the Tilium mining ship.
I was like, is she gonna make a choice? Like, does she like Raptors or Vipers better?
That's so funny.
Which is her favorite ship? I didn't realize that you were talking about like the fandom ships of characters.
Oh, I mean, we can go both ways on that. I definitely have feelings about the actual ships. But oh my gosh, man, their quiet relationship, I love it. I love it.
I love with Roslyn and Adama. I love how it starts. I love the progression of it.
Yes.
I love their mutual love of literature and
yes.
how they talk about it. And then I love how Adama at the end, like, all this stuff is going on and he's basically just throws his hands in the air. It's like, I'm going to go spend time with Laura Roslin. Okay, guys, leave me alone.
Well, he what does he say? I won't be coming back or whatever. So I don't understand that. He flew off with Roslin. Obviously, Roslin died, which is incredibly sad. Gets me every time. But why couldn't he come back to see Lee and Kara? Because at that point, he doesn't know that Kara is gone. That's one thing I did not understand, why it was the last time that Lee would see his dad.
I don't know, but it's definitely one of those. It's like that, especially the end of that. Not the end of the series, but that end where they finally have come out and they're like, "Yep, we are together. We are this couple," and it's like they just throw it all, and they're like Laura Roslin's president, but she's not even showing up anymore. She's like hanging out on the Battlestar, and that's what she's doing. She's like, this is my life now. I'm good with me and Bill.
Yep. I loved that. I love how at the beginning they were very much at odds, but they were both pointed in the right direction. They both, had the salvation of the fleet truly in their hearts, and were trying to do their level best to achieve that goal. And I love how it was very natural how they came together over time, I think. And that's why I like it, because it wasn't forced, not even a little bit for me. And it was so tragic at the same time. I just love them. I love them sitting at, what was it, the new Caprica groundbreaking, and they're sitting there talking about the cabin that she wants to build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I'm a sap.
Yeah, I always love when the relationships are just they're organic. They grow over time. They're not like, okay, these two characters need to get together. Let's figure out a way. Boom.
Yes.
We've done an episode, therefore now they're together. And on the flip side of that with like Billy and Duala is the same thing, where it was like these little moments, and it just built off those little moments to where they had that relationship, and even like them feeding information to each other about like, oh, what's happening with Adama or what's happening with Roslyn.
Yes.
Like I love that. Why
did Billy. They have to kill Billy?
because they had to add in Tori, the final 5 Cylon.
Wow,
Dun, dun,
Billy
dun.
could have been a Cylon. I'd have been fine with that. Could have been the best Cylon. So cute. Aw, little puppy. I thought they were so cute together, Duala and Billy. And again, it kind of worked not because of the plot, but in spite of the plot. With them feeding the information back and forth, it didn't exist for that. It was just a perk of the relationship. And those are my favorite kind. That's why I didn't love basically any other. Oh, okay, I can get behind Sol and Ellen because they're so tragically matched. It's not the same as Adama and Roslyn because it's not very much by choice in that, I love this person's company. I want to commit to that. It was that they needed each other in a very different way. And I love how it worked out in the larger story, like as a whole, with Ellen coming back. I wouldn't say I ship them, but I certainly don't not ship them.
Right. Like you can't really do much else with the ties besides, they're together. They will always be together forever through 3,000 plus years of history.
Yep. I bet they throw some baller dinner parties.
Now, on the flip side, we have talked about ships that did not work.
Yes, we have.
Tyrell and Callie, not really working. Anders and Kara post marriage, not really working on that one.
I loved Hilo and Sharon. There's another one that was great.
Yep. Although that betrayal, man, and at the with Boomer taking over Athena's.
Yes, that was so hard to watch.
Because how are you supposed to tell them apart?
Right, exactly. But as a wife, I would certainly hope that he could. Certainly. So I get where that's coming from. That also didn't feel contrived, that she would feel betrayed. That one hurt a little. They were so cute. And then it had to rocket very near towards the end.
Yep.
So good.
So many good things about this show.
There are, really. And the actual ships are great, too. I mean, we've talked about the graphics. Let me tell you, those curves, they are fantastic.
I feel like this is a moment in the podcast history for the show where it's going to be one of those things where it's going to get brought up and be like, so do you want to talk about the ships of Star Trek or Babylon 5? And you okay, yeah, I get where you're going with that one.
I do have to say that Galactica is not my favorite ship ever, but it's up there.
Speaking of ships, and I'm going to go with the actual physical ships. I like with Caprica where they show you the evolution of some of the ships there and the Vipers there, and then you get to see them in space, because at that point it doesn't seem like they've got they don't really have a space navy, a naval fleet. It's more like ships back and forth, but you see stuff in New Cap City and you see things that are reminiscent of Vipers, and it's I can see where they're getting these design looks.
It's very much point A, and you really see, even though they've worked backwards, because at that point, point B, Battlestar, already existed, and so they'd worked backward from that to get sort of the jumping off point. Again, very, very smart, especially from a design perspective. Although, as sexy as the Vipers were, I have to go with Team Raptor.
Team Raptor.
They were just so useful.
It is definitely. I like the Raptors. I like that their function is just that multi-purpose. They can do pretty much anything. They're a mix between a bomber, but you've got them doing all these other things. They can lock on and make airlocks to go into ships and take them over. And
they're very compact little. They're like the Swiss Army knife of space.
There you go. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Swiss Army knife of space.
They're pretty great.
They are. And I think the other thing that I liked about Raptors, it allowed multiple characters to be together and have like even more like focused interactions amongst each other.
Yes, especially when they were like staking things out, like, and they'd have to be out there for 12 hours. You can see how people would be thrown together, and just because they were around each other all the time, that would confuse me. Spending 12 hours with somebody, you would begin to think that there's a relationship there, whether or not there should be. You start to understand how these things happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we've gone 15 years. The miniseries launched it. We had a good run of Battlestar Galactica, a few tie-in movies and web series. We had one season of Caprica, which was, again, if you're here at this point, the only recommendation we can say is go watch it and get back to us.
Go. I want to hear about it. Really, let us know how much you like it. Or if you don't, that would surprise me, but I still want to hear it.
But that was a show that was tragically cut short, especially once you get to the last episode and you see what they were planning to do with it, where they were going to head with the storylines.
That's honestly cruel. Like, why don't they cut that out when they re-air it? Because it was just terrible.
It is. It's like almost like here's what's going to come up in season 2 of Caprica, and there's no season 2.
Awful.
So we had Blood and Chrome, which is one series that I did not watch. I know that it focuses on Adama during the first Cylon War.
It's good. It's not as good as Caprica. It certainly furthers the story. It's worth watching, but again, I think Caprica is really the shining jewel in the whole collection.
But we're six years out from Blood and Chrome.
It's
eventually
time
going
for
to be
another.
We're going to be 7. It's one of those things where, from an outside perspective looking in, number one, I understand there's a lot of money of costs to do these shows, especially with graphics and sets and having a larger cast and whatnot. But yeah, it feels like it's time for something in the Battlestar arena of getting some more material out there.
Well, look at what Game of Thrones costs. I mean, that's an extreme example, but I mean, most shows are not cheap. I mean, something like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, something with a multi-camera, that sort of thing is very cheap to produce. Sure, and you have those and they have their place. But I don't think in the wider spectrum it would be too terribly hard to do. I mean, if you look at Caprica, they didn't have big names. They don't have, they're not paying a Edward James Olmos the whole time. So it would be, fairly nondescript as far as costs go. It's just rich for the mining. I wish somebody would pick it up again. I really do.
Okay, so people who are listening out there, we need you to start some kind of campaign for SyFy to do a Battlestar Galactica something, because we need it. We need something Battlestar going on.
Yep, it's been too long.
It has been too long. It's kind of like how Battlestar started. There should have been like some kind of thing happening every couple of years.
Yes.
Like just keep it going.
Yes.
Whatever it could be.
Yes. I mean, we'll put it this way. I'm getting Captain Picard back, so I know dreams come true. Where's my Battlestar?
Where's your Battlestar? Well, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up? Anything else that maybe we forgot about and we need to just yell about it real quick?
Adam and Roslyn forever. No, nothing else.
All right. Well, Barbie, if people have loved listening to you talk about Battlestar, where can people find you online or on the internet?
If you love listening to me ramble about Battlestar, you should hear me ramble about Buffy. I would definitely go back and see or listen to the other episodes of Tales from the Fandom. I've had such a good time every time we've done this. Otherwise, I am also Asgard Barbie. You can type that into basically anything. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. Cosplay has slowed down a little bit lately with the house. Since I bought the house, it's been so hard to split my time between the two. But it happens slowly.
Yeah, definitely go follow Barbie, because all of your stuff, whenever you do post about it, is really good. And you do have a dog rescue, which I always want you to promote. So please say stuff about your dog rescue.
I love my dog rescue. I specialize in senior special needs and hospice dogs, which is kind of a niche in the dog rescue community. It's very needed, in my opinion. And you can find us. The best place to find us is on Instagram, Barbie Wi. It's Scottish for stay a while. Dog Haven. And you can find it through my Asgard Barbie pages as well. That's where you get to see the dogs being super cute and lazy and adorable.
Awesome. And I will say that your original episode was episode 9 on the podcast.
Oh, that's right. I'm an OG.
So yeah, you are one of the originals, and I have to say that I'm not sure, depending on what you are listening to this podcast on, some of them do not capture a lot of my original episodes. So if you're looking for Barbie's original episode, you can definitely come on to the main page, Tales from the Fandom, and look it up. Or you can email me, and I'll definitely get you a direct link to it. But back in 2016, we talked about Labyrinth.
Yeah.
And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was your current #1 fandom.
Oh, I still watch it. Absolutely. I don't anticipate it standing the test of time the way that Battlestar has. It's lovely, and I think it's very smart, but it doesn't touch Battlestar.
And we shockingly talked about Battlestar Galactica, and we talked about Torchwood, and we talked about Black.
I sometimes forget about Torchwood. It's just so good. It just exists out there still. So wonderful.
And we had a very long conversation about Black Widow and the general failure of marketing of female characters at the time. That gets me so riled up. And we even talked about the Marvel Cinematic Universe back before there was a Thor Ragnarok and a Doctor Strange and an Ant-Man. So that's like going way back in time, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But good stuff. Always good stuff with you as a guest on this podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love this podcast.
Hey, it's always my pleasure to have you on, and I hope everyone that listens enjoyed our throwback to 15 years of having Battlestar Galactica be awesome.
Here's to 15 more.
Exactly, with some more stuff in like included, please.
Yes, please.
At some point. But yeah, and you can even find the Blu-ray box sets relatively cheap occasionally on Amazon if you do a good job stocking their deals, because I picked it up and it was well worth the price.
Oh, that's cool. I think I'll do that. It's free on Amazon Prime if anybody has it. You can watch the original miniseries and all the series after. I'm not sure about the movies, but it is included with Amazon Prime.
And I'll make sure to post somewhere about the order of viewing all the stuff if you can find everything, because it really does help with the rewatch, putting everything into its correct place. Because there's sometimes, I think there's one where it's like you need to watch a movie in between 2 of the episodes to kind of get like a better picture of everything. But that'll be posted somewhere, and I'll make sure to have a link to it.
Yay! I'm actually really interested in seeing that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming back, Barbie. It's always my pleasure to have you as a guest.
Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.